Okay guys, welcome to this next tutorial. This one is a little bit more fun because this is where we actually put everything together. So let's assume that you have basically drawn all these individual parts, which you should have by now. So we've got the top and bottom plate for frame A, we've got the studs for frame A, and we've also got the blocks for frame A. So we're going to put all these parts together into a new file, a new assembly, which we're going to call assembly of frame A, or frame A assembly. So to do that in Fusion, let's zip across to here. The first thing we're going to do is actually start by creating a brand new file called the frame A assembly. So it doesn't matter what you've got on your screen. In fact, what I might do, I might just sort of close these files down so it's less confusing, hopefully. So you've probably got something blank like this, or if you don't have anything blank, just go File, New Design. And we'll save this straight away as Assembly Frame A, or Frame A Assembly. Frame A Assembly. Make sure it's in the construction pod location and click on Save. Alright, now in the past we'd started drawing here, but this time, because we've got all the parts over here in our data panel, we can actually then insert the parts that we want from this data panel into this new assembly. So the first thing I need you to do is to go and find the plate for frame A. So I'll look through my list, and down the very bottom I can see here plate for frame A. I'm going to right click on that, and the second option down says insert into current design. So we're not opening it, we're inserting this into this blank design here. So insert into current design, click on that, it takes a few seconds, it's retrieving it from the web, and it's placing this on our screen. Now what I might do is just zoom that down a little bit with two fingers, and what it's giving us is a preview of the plate. And you can see it's giving us all these different rotation handles here that we can rotate to orient the object where we want it to be. Now the first part we bring in, being this plate for frame A, what we need to do is position it in the position you see it here on the screen. Now you might have drawn yours differently to mine, so yours might have come in and it might be in this position. Or it might have been spun around in this position, perhaps. Who knows? All you need to do is to use these handles here by rotating these into different positions to aim through 90 degrees each time, and rotate it so that it's in this orientation. Now, each time that you do move or rotate something in an axis, it's always going to be by 90 degrees. So I've got that bottom plate pretty much where I want it. These other little squares and things, if you accidentally click on those, have to do with scale, so try not to touch those. The arrows here allow us to also move the object around in relationship to the axis that was there already. Try to leave those arrows alone at this point in time, but just get the object in this position using those different rotational objects there. Okay, once you've got it in that position, click on OK over here. And so we need to now make sure that this this plate doesn't move. So you can see here now, once I clicked OK, it then puts this plate for frame A in the model tree. So there's frame A assembly, that's what we're working on. Very important, that's got a little dot beside it there. Then this is the first part we've brought in as part of that assembly. So that this part doesn't move, what I want you to do is to right click on frame A, and the first option says ground. Now click on ground. Nothing seems to have happened, but what has happened is that Fusion has now locked this plate for frame A in position. So therefore all other parts that we bring in will move relative to it. It's like stuck in space, it can't move. Okay, so let's assume that we were building this like we were doing in the workshop. So we're going to put our studs on top of this bottom plate, and then we'll put the top plate on, and then the last thing we'll do, we'll put the blocks in between. So where are the studs? Over to your data panel. There's studs for frame A, B, and C. They're all the same. So right click onto there, insert into current design. Takes a few seconds. And you can see here's my object has just come into position. Now at this point, what we want to do is try to separate the two objects so they're not crossing over each other. So I'm going to grab this little arrows here. I'm going to drag it up so it's clear of the other object. I'm not too concerned about these distances, but also what I want to make sure is that this object is also in the correct orientation. So if this had come in like this, see how that's not correctly orientated. So this longest edge here is actually at a right angle to this longest edge here. So what we want to do is position these by using these rotation handles here, so that that long edge is now parallel with that long edge there. Okay, so once you've got it roughly in the right position or the right orientation, click OK. There's no need to ground this because we want this to now move to this grounded piece. Now to move two parts together, to actually join them together, this is kind of like putting the nails into it. What I need you to do is to create a joint between this stud and this plate. Now joints are found up here in the top toolbar into the Assemble tab. It's on the right hand side. Simply click on Joint, and we've got this dialog box. Now this dialog box just tells us a few things. It's asking us for two components to join between. So the first component is always the component that needs to move. So that's this component here, that's this stud. And the second component will be the bottom plate. Now as I'm hovering over my work there, you can see these little circles appearing. Now what these circles are jointing positions. And not just positions but also directions as well. What I'm going to do is show you a couple of different ways that we could make a joint between these two objects. The first way, and it's probably the most, I suppose, obvious way, is to move your cursor along this bottom edge here until the selector, the circle there, turns into locating the end point or this corner that's closest to us. And you'll also notice that the circle is on a flat plane. See, in there it's a vertical plane, there it's a flat plane, and if I sort of muck around a bit, see there's a vertical plane. So depending upon where you put your cursor will then determine whether or not your locating point is actually going to be a flat or a vertical surface. So I'm going to demonstrate, and we'll talk about a few others as we go. So I'm going to select this point here on the end of this stud, and with that in that flat sort of orientation, click once. This piece now sort of disappears from view. You can see over here it's selected it, and if you wanted to deselect that, you could just click on that and try again. And then we now need to select on our actual frame here where we want that corner to align with. Now as I bring my cursor on this top surface here, you'll see that the cursor most of the time stays in that flat orientation. If I was to drag it down there, you'll see sometimes that it stays in that vertical orientation, which is not correct. We need to make that surface and this one both parallel with each other. So that corner there to that corner there, click once, and if all goes correct, it sort of does a little shuddery sort of thing, which represents that it's doing a rigid joint, which is fine, and it appears to have joined it correctly. Now at this point, you can still edit this by pulling these arrows left and right, and you can even rotate stuff. But we don't want to do that because that's actually in the right position. And I'll show you how we use these arrows in a second with the next actual joint. So that's in the correct spot. What I might show you is a second way of being able to do this, but I'll do it on another piece, so not to be too confusing. So you've got this in the correct spot. It looks good. You'll see here that as soon as we hit OK, over in our file tree, we've also now got a option that says joints. Now if you don't like seeing these joints actually being turned on here, you can actually click the eyeball to turn them off so it's easier to see. I think it's actually easier if you have those turned off. So you can just turn them on and turn them off as you need to be. Okay, so we've got plate frame A, stud frame ABC is in there. Righto, so now let's put the next stud in. Now, there's two ways you could do this. You could right click here, stud, and insert again, or we can copy and paste this stud frame that's already in there. So what I'm going to do, is simply click on the stud frame, right click, copy, and then Command V for paste, and you can see it just grabs a copy of that and just pastes it somewhere in space. Now the beauty about doing it that way is if you've already got this in the correct position, you don't then have to change this too much. You don't have to get the orientation differently. Alright, so what I'm going to do is just move this down to the far end, and using my 2 fingers on the mouse there, that's kind of almost in the right spot. I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to put a joint between this stud here and the bottom plate here. So come up to joints, click. Remember, the first joint is always the piece that we want to move. So I'm looking for something that is common between this stud and this frame, and obviously it's this bottom right corner here. So it's going to be that corner there to that corner there. So I'm just going to show you something a little bit different though. I'm just going to spin this around so you can see the end. I'm holding down my shift key and 2 fingers on the trackpad to do that. And rather than choosing that corner and then that corner, I also want to show you this option, which is really handy. As I zoom out a bit, or zoom in a bit I should say, as I move my cursor along there, see how it snaps to a midpoint as well. So halfway between these 2 points, you see this midpoint appears. Midpoint's really handy for doing joints. So I'm going to experiment with this one. So I'm going to go that midpoint there, 1. And I'm going to find the corresponding midpoint along here. And you can see there it is there, 2. So we complete the same operation as well. So it doesn't have to always be an outside corner. It could be a midpoint as well. I'm happy with that. I click OK. I'm just going to go back to my home view by clicking on the little home symbol there. So I've got the 2 outside studs in, stud 1 and stud 2. Now if we have a look on our drawing, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more studs and 3 more blocks to put in. So importantly we need to know what the distance is from the outside of our frame to the next stud, which we can see here the dimension tells us it is 415 from the outside of that frame to the stud, 415. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's go back to Fusion. Let's copy and paste a stud, so it doesn't matter which one it is. I can get Command C, Command V, and I'm going to move this away a little bit like so. It's still sort of correctly orientated though. That long edge there is parallel with that long edge. Click OK. And let's apply a joint. And this time I'm going to choose this bottom left corner like we did for this first frame here. That one. And I'm going to then snap it once again to that same known position, because I don't have anything to locate it to along here. So snap it to there. Now you'll see that it joins directly over the top of that one. You say, so that's no good. Well, we can still edit that position by moving this arrow along a set distance. So from there it's set at 0 at the moment. If I grab this arrow and I drag it along, I can now set that distance that I'm dragging it to be the correct distance. Now we said from that corner there to that corner there, I should say, on my drawing, from that corner to that corner was 415. So from that corner where we had it to that corner where we want it is not 350, it is 415. Type 415 in, hit the return key, and happy days. Let's do that at the other end as well. Excuse me. Select the stud, Command C, Command V, drag it kind of near the position we want, click OK. Now let's put a joint between the 2 of them, joint, This time I'm going to choose the bottom right corner. Excuse me. Once there, back to this known position. That one there. Excuse me. And now we're going to move with the arrow tool back in this direction. Now you see, because I'm moving it to the left of the origin, it's always going to be a negative value. So not negative 400, but negative 415. So just change that to negative 415. And you can see you can change that here in the other dialog box as well. And click OK. Okay, so we've got our 1, 2, 3, 4 studs in. We've got 2 more studs to go. And we can see here we'll do that exact same process, knowing that this stud is 830 millimeters from the corner of the bottom frame here. So 830 from there to there. So same process and from both sides. Okay, so Command C, Command V. Let's bring that across roughly in the right position. Let's make a joint. This bottom left corner here to this one here. And then drag it away to the right, 830. And OK. And the last one, I'm going to hit Command V. Oh, there you go. It was in the memory of the computer, so we can do Command C or Command V again. And same thing here, roughly in the right position. Let's put a joint on. This time it's this far right corner, that one to that one. And then drag it in a negative 830. So let's type negative 830 and return. Okay, let's have a look. Hold my shift key down and 2 fingers on the mouse there. That's looking correct. Alright, let's go back to home view. Let's put the top plate on. So because we've already got a plate in there which is exactly the same, we can go find, there it is, plate frame A, click onto it once. Command C, Command V. Let's drag it up so it's kind of rough in the right spot but not touching it, because that's not a joint, that's just positioning. Now let's put a joint on. This is pretty easy, this one. It's just going to be that corner there to that corner there. It locks it in position. Click OK. And then the last thing to do is to put the blocks in between here. Alright, so I'm not going to do the blocks. I'm going to leave the blocks for you to have a go at using those different commands as well. Okay guys, so then hit save to make sure you don't lose it. You put the blocks in and then copy paste that into your document.